We're going to do a little test. Can you please state your name and affiliation?
I am Michael John Miller. I am the Chief Librarian at Bronx Community College.
Gotcha. Yeah. No worries in the least. Thank you so much for participating in this project. And today is December 6th, 2022. And this is part of the BCC 10-year anniversary oral history project. Can you please state your name and affiliation?
Sure. I'm Michael Miller, and I'm the Chief Librarian at the Bronx Community College Library of the City University of New York.
Awesome. Lovely. Thank you so much for participating. And I was wondering if you would like to say a little bit about yourself and where you're from. You could begin from anywhere you like, your starting point. This is your story. Just share a little bit about your beginnings.
Sure. I am a native son of Erie, Pennsylvania, and I grew up there for the first 18 years of my life. Went to college, started my librarianship stuff that early, and we'll talk more about that as we go along here.
Okay, no worries. Tell me a little bit about your early childhood and education and how that sort of led to your interests in librarianship. Tell me a little bit about that path.
Sure. This is mainly school-based, and I would say that from the earliest ages, I always just kind of hung out in the library. So in first or second grade, I was helping check out books to my classmates. In Boy Scouts, I was the troop librarian. In high school, my free periods were always spent in the library. And then eventually in college, with my work-study work, I helped with research from the professors in my department. So all along the way, I've been in libraries.
And where did you go to college? How did that happen?
Well, it was local. I came from a working-class family, and I was the first one to go to school. And basically, when I announced that I wanted to go to college, I was just informed by my parents that I needed to figure out how to pay for it. And I had an uncle who said, well, just stay local and you won't have to worry about too many expenses. So I went to Penn State, Erie, Barron College.
And what was that experience like?
It was liberating. For the first time, I think it's similar to most people's college experiences, regardless of whether it was close to home or not. It's like one of the first adult steps in life. And you learn to trust your instincts, follow rules, make independent decisions, and reap the rewards, benefits, and sometimes lessons learned when you're in college.
Right. Can you tell me a little bit about the atmosphere, the climate, the people, any of the exchanges or experiences that you had, any positive, reminiscences of that time?
I think the heaviest stuff really came from the department experience and the professors. I did have to put myself through school, so I had a lot of work study and part-time work in addition to college. So I kept busy both with maxing out on credits so I could get done as soon as possible, as well as doing too much work. So to back it up, the most solid relationships were formed with the department faculty. I eventually landed in my choice of major with speech communication and rhetoric. And with those professors in the communication and the other humanities divisions, I just linked up with them on the work study. So they became mentors. I excelled in most of the courses where, I was aligning my other work with my classwork and those relationships. So,
and in case you mentioned this again, I apologize. But what was the major that you were focusing on? Your major course?
Initially, it was speech communication and rhetoric. And then I also had a minor in psychology.
And tell me a little bit about your trajectory at the student. Who were those most influential people who were influencing your way of thinking at that time around those topics and subjects?
Right. Well, before school, I had Boy Scouts, and I had a best friend from second grade. And we were kind of competitive over time. We would challenge each other to get, the most participatory points for extracurricular activities, get the badge, and grades and things like that. So I had peers that were influential. And then a constellation of people outside my family, like folks from Boy Scouts. And then as I moved on to doing work in college, also employers and things of that nature. So I had a lot of outward-facing contact with examples of what success might be able to be. And so I took a lot of cues for the career and personal choices from that constellation of people.
Nice. And you basically, can you describe a little bit about what your reaction was to that influence? Their influence on you and how that informed your choice of focusing on speech.
Right. Well, first of all, with influences, I think the external stuff, I think as an uppity young child, I saw more than I saw in my home environment, and it was inspirational. And so even though cues are coming from the outside, I kind of wrapped it up with like the work ethic. My family did have a good work ethic. They just weren't into higher ed at the time. So I combined the two kinds of opportunities, or resources, or how would you say, fertilizer. And that was also, I mixed a lot with the Boy Scout stuff. We briefly intimated that, I was going for the badges. And that really has become a way of life for me. When I proceed in my career, I look at the list of options that are in front of me. I try to find or, determine what would be the most comfortable direction to go. Then I look for the rules in order to figure out how to complete the requirements, and then hopefully succeed where I set my goals, and then put that aside and move on to the next thing. So it was a pattern I think really established early on in scouting.
Right. So this desire to achieve, right? How did that align, and how did that lead towards a path towards public service as exemplified through librarianship? I'm very curious about knowing a little bit more about that journey, if you can describe that to me a little bit.
Right. Public service. Well, I would say that, first of all, the environment of schooling probably provided a good, how would you say, petri dish. It was a public school. At the time, Penn State Erie Barron College was a community college transforming into a 4-year. So essentially, I started my academic career at a community college.
Yes.
And from there, what I would say is, again, with being informed with the other things I participated in life, like scouting, scouting has a big service component in it. And not only that, another thing I got from my family, service. A lot of my family was in human services in their work environment, volunteer fire persons. And I have a sister who dedicated a whole career to assisting mentally and physically handicapped children. So looking outward is kind of a way of life for the clan, if you will, and where I come from. And so service, as it translates up through the academic experience, I think really kind of led me to more institutions that were public oriented. And of course, librarianship in and of itself is a service industry kind of career. And it was one that I was comfortable in. And so here we are, serving the public in a public institution.
So then making that transition from your college path to a librarian path, can you tell me a little bit about that? Deciding which school, which program, and how you sort of started climbing those ranks to leading you towards CUNY.
Right. Again, take the needle and thread all the way back to the beginning. In school, second grade, at the library, study hall, and then work study. And in particular with the work study, what level was that on? That was college. And I would do research assignments for my professors, going to the library and asking for the then librarian on staff at Penn State Erie for assistance. They got me into doing what was then the online database searches, which one could not do independently at the time. You had to go through the mediation of a librarian. And I found that interesting and hopefully brought a lot of good results back to the professors that needed the background research. At the time, that librarian gave me an application for a Penn State grant for those who intend to go into librarianship after college. And like I said before, seeing pathways that feel comfortable is usually how I proceed through the career. So I applied for that Penn State grant. Cited schools like UCLA, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and Rutgers, and eventually I did enroll in the Rutgers program.
It's fascinating that you had an opportunity to participate in a pipeline program like that into librarianship, because those aren't very common programs. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think it was just a good way to recruit into the profession.
Right.
And for me, it worked. They were successful.
Yeah, do you think that maybe perhaps there should be more accessibility towards pipelines like that to encourage folks to enter the field of librarianship? I
do think it would not hurt the profession, especially because, in this post-pandemic great resignation environment, we're going to need all the tools we can to get more people into the profession. I think the other thing that goes alongside that, though, is really homegrown professionals. We'll eventually talk about my experience at CUNY. I was at Queens College previously, and at Queens College, we tended to take a look around at the student workers, again, a student worker role, who were comfortable in the environment and being productive and looked like they might have the energy to go through and sustain, engagement in library science. This is how Emma came into the profession. She was a student worker way back when at Queens College, and she worked in the administration office. She became friends with one of the other librarians. They encouraged her to go to library school. Like me, she probably thought, this probably isn't a bad idea. And she pursued library science and got it. And now Emma's one of our colleagues here at this college. Right. So a homegrown librarian.
Absolutely.
Through mentoring and recruitment.
No, I think it's excellent to provide those different avenues more towards mentorship as well, to sort of encourage folks who wouldn't necessarily think or visualize that they had a space in this field to say, yes, you do have a space in this field to fill. going back towards your program at Rutgers, any memories of the participating in the library program there? Any highlights, any reminiscence about that?
Not really. It was one of the smaller programs, and I would just say in hindsight or the rearview mirror, I actually used that experience overall or generally in coming through one of the smaller programs, which is 36 credits and no thesis, as a jumping off point for my future research. When I finished that program and got into my first career job at Lehigh University, I had set my sights on eventually wanting to become an academic librarian in reference at an urban institution near water. So I was aiming my job sites at San Francisco, New Orleans, Chicago, New York as my path forward. And along the way, an academic librarian needs a minimum of at least a second master's. So at Lehigh, when I had free tuition, I pursued a second master's program. They could not cobble together the political rhetoric of female politicians thing that I wanted to do, which would have been my ideal second master's. So I stepped sideways to something that would be much more useful, I thought, in library science, and that was educational technology. And so in the pursuit of that degree and moving forward in my career, I look back at library science needing to augment it with that instructional design or educational technology degree, and that became the basis of my research. So that threads, in a very broad way, what I brought out of the Rutgers program.
Awesome. And so tell me a little bit about that experience juggling those demands, pursuing. I don't think that we explored that question enough in previous interviews, this idea of juggling the demands of pursuing a second professional degree while working as a librarian is something that I don't think gets acknowledged enough. The demands and travails and having to balance all that, and how that is prevalent in the librarianship field for many folks, especially those who wish to pursue academic librarianship. Any thoughts you care to share about that? Or
Well, I would just say for me, it was made easy. I was at an institution, Lehigh University Libraries, where they were very respectful of people's workloads, time commitments. I think because it was my first job, I did put a lot of extra evening hours in, but it wasn't really mandatory. It made for a great legacy and, review of my work. But in the meantime, when I wasn't doing extra work, being a hyperactive young individual, getting, one class a semester or two classes a semester was not a burden at the time.
right.
And it was a lower cost of living. I didn't have to have a second job otherwise. So it was a comfortable way to go about it, which I know is not necessarily what a lot of people enjoy in New York City in this day and age, where you may have to have multiple jobs to survive and pay the rent. And so getting extra credentials is even more challenging.
Right.
So that informs my leadership now. I really feel like if people need to get the credential, which they do here if they don't have it, the second master's, I support them because I know it's a requirement and people should not be ground into, a stressful ball of, leftover professional dreams.
Right.
They should get the support they need to be able to do what they need to do.
Right.
So.
And thinking about how this transitions towards, so then thanks to the support you received at Lehigh for your professional development, you were able to acquire the second master's. And then tell me about how that curtailed into your eventual landing at CUNY?
Flipping. I was at Lehigh, so that was landlocked.
Mm-hmm.
So I still had my sights on finding that urban academic experience near water.
Right. And remind me again, I'm sorry to interrupt, time frame wise, like what decade was that when you were at Lehigh, and how that transitions time wise to you coming to CUNY at some point, making that transition?
So I started the professional work after the master's program in 91. Mm. And by the time I was chomping at the bit to find the best place according to my criteria, in January of 95, I landed at Columbia University as a social work librarian, service once again, and I was able to finish my second master's classes, an independent study and a media effects class at the Teachers College Graduate School of Education, and transfer those final credits back to Lehigh to get that second master's finished. So got to New York, got to the urban, waterbound place, completed the degree, established, the second step in my career at a pretty prestigious university, which will always help the resume. And from there, Columbia is a very slow-moving machine, and one could spend a lifetime not moving too far. And I guess I have an inclination to always see what the next challenge is. And Columbia wasn't moving fast enough for me. So 3 years later, I stepped sideways in the profession, and I went into public libraries. And I went into the Brooklyn Public Library System as the manager of electronic resources, which actually turned out to be a manager of reference technology training. So after grappling with reforming my expectations on what that job was, I got into the professional development gig within the field of librarianship at this large public library system. And so I did that for probably 7 years before I stepped sideways once again back into CUNY at Queens College as the head of access services in a tenure track position, which was one of those early goals, to be a tenure track academic librarian. So that's where I went.
That's fascinating, that transition from having started your career in academic librarianship to sideways to public librarianship. Tell me a little bit about your feelings, any takeaways from that time delving into public librarianship. What were some things that you thought were really interesting or that stood out for you, having come from academic librarianship and then back again?
Right. Well, I think the credentials I brought forward, having been at Lehigh, which is a technology university, having been at Columbia, where they were making their foray into using the World Wide Web as a research tool, web pages, library guides, lists of links by subject. I was able to go into an institution that was a little bit behind. And so that technology training and professional development
at Brooklyn Public Library.
At Brooklyn Public Library was something I came pretty well qualified for. And the system was resistant. A lot of the librarians in the system at Brooklyn were resistant to having internet terminals in libraries, going into digital reference, and things of that nature. So it was interesting to see the difference between the, how would you say, innovative approach to library evolution or development, and those who are more comfortable doing what they always do. So you're starting to learn things like that. And of course, I mentioned I had to recalibrate my expectations about the job and the title. So I was introduced more so to politics in the workplace and making your way through that. What else from the Brooklyn Public Library system?
Any experiences working with the public, or some nuances or differences or similarities working with
Well, I think the development team was really behind the scenes. So for me, I just got a lot of good varied experience working with grant programs, trying to put my expertise in library technology into play. We developed like a small business website on one of those grants for teen services throughout the system. We also had another grant with regards to using distance technologies for professional development training. So the Brooklyn Public Library system has 50 branches, and people would always have to travel across the big borough during work days to come and get training on these new developments that they need for their job. And one of the things we tried to overlay that with, or undergird it with, was bringing distance ed training to the system. And so that brings us to other lessons learned. That grant and program were put into place, but eventually it was taken over by administration so that it could be farmed out for a money-making tool for the system. You're a business leader, you want to use our system for business meetings and have people from disparate places come to a business meeting, you can use our system. So the benefit to the staff of the library kind of was worn away, pressed down a little bit. When I left the system, that website I mentioned earlier immediately got folded and put on the shelf. So you see that the work that you've done isn't necessarily permanent. So you have to really learn how to make sure you're making an impact at the time, be grateful that you can do that, and be ready to move along if you need to, and not mourn things that are in the past.
Right. Yeah. And let's transition or pivot over to your transition to Queens College then from BPL, if I'm understanding the chronology correctly.
Yeah, I think it was situational.
Yeah.
It was along about the time of post 9/11. So the administration of the public library system had changed. They brought in a new administration. That new administration was going to be getting rid of the professional development unit. I had been transferred to marketing and communications and was reporting to someone that did not respect the fact that I was a librarian, that I had professional engagements outside the system with national and local service, and they were going to be, how would you say, squelching some of the predetermined activities that I thought were important for my own work and career. And so I decided it was time to leave.
Okay.
Yeah.
And tell me about that transition to Queens College. So then you acquire this position at Queens College. Tell me a bit about that transition and pursuing that tenure track line, and anything that stands out, any takeaways from that experience and transition into CUNY, basically.
It was a job description that looked like one that I could handle. And I wanted to dip my toes into, again, advancement in career. In that case, it would have been middle management, moving from frontline to management. So it was ahead of access. And it was a good first foray into middle management. The director at the time was a SUNY and CUNY longtime director and leader, Sharon Bonk. She was very supportive. I had a good mentor at Queens College in Isabella Taylor. She was the liaison for the Graduate School of Library and Information Science. So it was good to have the library science librarian as a mentor when I wanted to pursue advancing my career in librarianship. It was a good match. She was smart, supportive, nudged me in the right direction when I was going the wrong way, or encouraged me otherwise when things were going well. So it was really comfortable. I had a lead staff in the various areas of access services. Probably the most important across those was Simone Nearwood. And Simone was an independent young non-professional, we sometimes say, a non-librarian, but she managed circulation desk. And she would want me interfering with daily business only when she needed me. So she was independent. She called me in when she needed to. She worked with me when we were asked to make change. So we were good partners. But even with her independence, it helped me be able to get accomplished what I wanted to get accomplished. One thing that really helped me at Queens College with successes, that was a time when the contract period had tenure on a 5-year cycle. So essentially everything had to be done in 4.5 years. Also at that time, with the new contract that started right when I started, librarians got more time awarded than had previously been allowed. So I benefited from strong support in the workplace, like from people like Simone, as well as a lot of research time. So I was able to actually be productive in a scholarly manner as well. So I had time, I had support, I had mentoring. It was a good bundle.
And what did the benefits of that bundle provide you in your professional development?
Sure. I immediately benefited because I was successful in scholarship, as I mentioned. This allowed a strong package for tenure, got tenure, and the same year or the following spring, I'm not sure how it was aligned at that college now. I went up for promotion, so I went up for promotion almost immediately. And because I tried to make sure, as Isabella would have said, I filled every basket, every requirement. I was management, I did my scholarship, I was active in the National Association. I also became active in the International Library Association, IFLA. I had a really strong package for promotion as well. So that package played for both actions. And it's at that time when management of that library changed over. And then I started bargaining with my strong legacy or history. I basically let the new administration know that I could take on more. I could take on a higher management role. They introduced a public services, basically assistant chief librarian position. And so I got reference and instruction alongside the access services, and went on. And that's kind of the next step in my management. And so that all played pretty well. A year after I got promoted, I did apply for a sabbatical and I was granted a full year sabbatical. And so I took advantage of the work I had been doing with my international library associations. I was a guest speaker at a couple of international programs in the UK, as well as a guest speaker in Serbia at their national library. And I'm trying to think. Oh, I had also gone the route of pursuing Fulbright grants, and I was awarded a Fulbright in 2011. Went to Morocco and Tunisia to learn about religion in North Africa. I had framed that as something that could inform collection development for the college, knowing more of a subject area that I had not had previous exposure to. They bought it. I got the award, went there. And so during that sabbatical, I was also finishing my Fulbright project requirement. So
It's wonderful to know that CUNY was able to provide you with opportunities to go further in your professional development in areas that I think a lot of colleagues now in other systems outside of CUNY aren't able to enjoy. That rank of faculty and professorship isn't all that common in our field. Do you have any thoughts to share about that, the idea of faculty status for librarians in academic systems, the benefits, and any thoughts on the threats of how that's being chipped away, I guess, sometimes in different systems and in different areas?
Right. At this point, I would put on my mentoring cap.
Right.
And I would say, before you get into a position, look at the documentation that are the rules of that particular organization. And so I advise the junior faculty here that are coming in and getting on the tenure track, make sure you look at your contract. Know what's in your contract, know what rights and benefits you have. And the same for any other institutional documentation. An example at CUNY is the Board of Trustees bylaws. So those things define what our lives and roles are. And so in that Boy Scout kind of way, you can make your checklist of what you want to do, compare it to what resources you'll be able to get. And then after you have all of that in order, work on your relationships and make sure that you do have a mentor and make sure you do have support of the leader in your organization. And when you don't, either discuss it with them to see if you will be getting the support, or it might be time to figure out if you're never going to get the support and whether you need to cut your losses and move sideways and try again somewhere else. So I think that's about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so tell me about your time at Queens College and how that catapulted you to your next career move, your next career transition, and how you landed here at BCC.
Right. So post sabbatical, I was back for a year. And then in the more close administration of the CUNY libraries than we see these days, I think. We're more separated right now than we have been in the past, I believe. At least at a directorial or administrative level. There's a dean of libraries in the CUNY Central office. Curtis Kendrick approached me about whether I'd be interested in my current position. And always looking for the next step, I thought, sure, I could try it. And I was interviewed by the then president of BCC and eventually made an offer.
And so tell me about that transition in arriving at BCC, and can you share any memories of being on the campus at that time? What year was that, by the way? And
Sure.
Anything about that time that you care to share?
So we are in 22 now. This happens to be, with this project, the 10-year anniversary of the building of this library and classroom building. And that coincides with my arrival. The then president was looking for a new chief librarian within that same year. My 10-year anniversary is going to be February 1st of 23. So I've been here 10 years. And at the beginning, I think that's the question you asked, I guess I brought with me my experience of being a frontline person and a middle manager, and successful with my career. That toolkit helped inform how I wanted to present myself as a leader here. And I guess scouting did too. So here I remember sitting in our information literacy room with the first meeting I called with the full staff, and letting them know that I was going to be a participatory leader. I would want to hear people's opinions. I would have an open door, that we needed to be collegial, and that I would try to help however I can advance the library, as well as each of the careers, that the people were worried about as they were participating in this group activity. So that was the beginning. The next thing I did was I scheduled one-on-one meetings with every staff member. So I had 50 meetings at the time, to make sure I knew who people were, what skill sets they were bringing, what their current experience was, and then also maybe what their aspirations might be otherwise. So I tried to really gather as much information as possible about what this place was before trying to make any decisions.
And what did you find?
What did I find? I found a lot of people that were interested in the work that they were doing. Some people wanted to make change. Some people clammed up and just wanted to, keep on the same path they were. There was a variation. And what? You just have to take it in and use it to inform your decisions. I think the other thing that went alongside my own process of coming to know the place was I had to hit the ground running. I came in the middle of an academic year, and I had to get familiar with all of the routines that the academic library director needed to make sure they were meeting so that they could actually get business done, support the tenure and promotion process, keep purchasing and budget moving forward, as well as hiring and all the human resource factors. So immediately, I had to pull out what I knew from Queens College, working within the same system, and apply as much as possible to the ongoing business. And then, go to the experts about, campus business, to make sure I wasn't missing anything or misinterpreting things. So I had to, take the qualitative stuff and wet it with the mandatory things.
Right.
Running the business.
What were some of the challenges you encountered that first year, transitioning into this new leadership administrative role at the campus and being an advocate for the library on this campus at that time? And it seems like a lot too, because it was not only a new role for you, but then also a new building and new transition, any nuances between working at a senior college to a community college.
I think one of the stark differences between my work at Queens College and my work at Bronx was that I became the main contact for the department. And so, coming up with the social landscape with all those interviews and people's energies, trying to figure out the lay of the land for the operational stuff, also had to meet this whole other thing of representation. I was the lead face for the library. So public relations, working with other departments, working with administration, all of that was put together, the three sides. And I think for the first year and a half, I went home and slept 2 hours every day after work, just because it was intense. But it needed to be learned and brought together. So.
Right. And what were some takeaways? Any stories that you have to share about that time, that first year, transitioning to the second, and thinking about the impact that the library now, how that's developed over the 10 years, thinking about the library's impact on the BCC campus community and the role that it serves? Right.
One of the things that really floated to the top in some of those external conversations was that the library was apart from the campus. And I think I even got some of that from inside, like the library is looked at as a black sheep, or they don't pay attention to us. So that actually became one of my main themes, to make sure we worked on our presence, our marketing and PR, and communication. I put myself on quite a few committees that were campus-wide so that there could be a library presence in front of other administrators and other department leaders. The P&B process allowed for that as well. I was in constant communication with the other academic department chairs. And administration of the college also has administrative level meetings. Again, I got exposure and could represent when I was in the presence of other campus administrators. So I think the profile of the library was a priority, and I feel like I've done a good job with the profile and communication. These days, while I try to maintain that, I now also turn that into a mentoring moment with the faculty members of the department. I want to make sure that they're collaborating with an interdepartmental frame of mind, working with their peers across the academic units, if not also in other service-oriented administrative units across campus. I just think it's a good way to belong to the community, and it helps us get some of the stuff we need to get our work done, and it brings our value up in the other unit's eyes as well.
And do you have any goals for the library department in the next few years in regards to like where we should set our sights as a department, where our focus should be to serve, better serve the campus?
Well, one of the old goals is still unmet. We did a planning, a self-assessment that's part of the Middle States accreditation process. And our external reviewers came back to us with a list of recommendations. A lot of that has been implemented, some of it has not. In particular, though, what's really come to the fore right now is the fact that with the pandemic and the administrative decisions of the college, we've lost 50% of our staff. So my biggest priority right now in an emergency kind of mode is restoring staffing. And in what do they call it? The Great Resignation environment, post-pandemic, if you will. Is that a real term? It's been really difficult to restore the staffing. A lot of energy is going into that.
And what do you think those obstacles are that are contributing to the difficulty in
I think the workforce has changed. The workforce expectations are changed. And even today, I was thinking about how our processes have to change. I'm running a search right now for a faculty position. We came up with 6 final resumes that we want to interview, with 3 backup resumes. 2 of the original 6 and 1 of the backups have already withdrawn from the search. And this search was not prolonged. It opened a month and a half ago, and we're already losing the cream of the crop. So we have to figure out administratively how to be even more successful in recruitment.
And thinking about what do you believe is the role and impact that the library plays predominantly on the BCC campus and community?
I think the main role is really touching on the experience of the student. As a library director, and I guess this goes back to the beginning of the 10 years, I wanted to make sure that I kept my fingers on the front line. And I would schedule myself often for reference work because that's where I came from. I enjoy it. That's where I got a lot of my reward when I was a frontline reference librarian in the past. And I had seen in these early years of this 10-year span, the students just are ever so thankful when you can talk to them about how to solve their academic questions, which also then impacts their lifelong learning needs. The questions for solving, their life issues. I just brought it up this weekend over this holiday. One of the most rewarding things that ever happened to me was when I taught a 1-credit information literacy course when I was at Queens College. A year and a half later, one of the students out of that class contacted me from an Ivy League school saying if they hadn't have taken my course, they would be nowhere near as successful as they were currently in their Ivy League academic pursuits. And that kind of a reward is just heartwarming.
It really is. And do you have any special memories that stand out from working in this new building? Back when you started initially, it just seems so auspicious that the new building also coincided with you coming to the campus. Anything that stands out?
I guess just odd things like being interviewed by the campus about the impact of the new building. There's a snippet on CUNY TV with that interview. It still plays. People contact me about it still. One time I went to the old classical library that's on campus, the original NYU library, and I snuck up the back stairs. And I went to explore what that space looked like, and it was just unbelievable. The other things really are having the good relationships with all of the various departments, as I had described earlier. At Queens College, I was a librarian at a service desk and not really involved with faculty across campus. And that's completely different here. We are smaller, we're much closer to other educational leaders, and those relationships help inform what we need to do and kind of bring back evidence of how well we're doing or not. And so they're valuable in a way that I had not had as a resource previously. So I really like the idea that you're closer to people and it's beneficial.
And at the end of the day, how would you characterize the impact of this work on your life and in your own thinking?
I think it still informs me that I can approach a career in a very orderly and patterned fashion, that I still think it's important to maintain a work-life balance. Some people may find it frustrating, but I don't necessarily leave myself open for communication on weekends or when I'm on vacation. But I think that's an important human factor, especially in a time when you could really get sucked into the game of trying to succeed in a career. The bar never seems to get lowered. I've gone through my gauntlet, and I'm at a certain stage where I'm not challenged as much as others, but I know what that means for people. And I'm pretty much of the belief that that has not gotten any easier over time. So I guess for the workplace, it informs me that I need to be supportive of those that I'm responsible for supporting. And in the home life, enjoy your successes. And I'm busy doing both of that.
I think we're done. Is there anything else you wanted to cover or share before we wrap up?
I think I'm okay.
Thank you so much for participating.
Glad to have been here. Thanks, Cynthia.